you've got to divide evolution into two parts: process and origin. Okay? I accept evolution as a process, as a theory of a process. I reject evolution as an origin. Why? I feel that there is no evidence that life comes from non-life. And evolution as an origin is a belief that life comes from non-life. Secondly,
That ain't sound
That's not true.
confusing evolution with abiogenesis.
Scientifically speaking, they would say that we originated from stardust and that the Big Bang, came through to like carbon and other organisms.
It's interesting that you say I feel that it's not. I mean,
yeah.
you know what? Yeah, let him finish.
Abiogenesis.
evolution as an origin is not science. Evolution as an origin is a philosophy of science. It's a philosophy that says order and design can come about by chance. Life can come from non-life by chance. I am convinced philosophically that both of those statements are wrong. I do not think that you get order and design without a designer. As I observe reality, the only time that design occurs is if there is a designer. I don't care if it's designer jeans. I don't care if it's a BMW or a Mercedes. I don't care if it's the way she has dressed herself. So orderly and beautiful, it doesn't come about by chance. Order and design demand an intelligent mind. Secondly, I am convinced from my observation that life comes from life. Plant life comes from plant life. Animal life comes from animal life. Human life comes from human life. You never once get life, animate, coming from non-life, inanimate. It does not occur. That is why I cannot take this quantum leap of faith, blind faith, and say, oh, but at one point, non-life generated life. I can't buy that because of the evidence that I see around me. Third point.
Which is like the basis of life.
Third point. I am convinced that Charles Darwin made a mistake when he extrapolated the following. Because in a few years I have been able to breed pigeons to the point where they have turned into beautiful birds with colorful plumes and beaks, that therefore if you give me millions of years, we can go from one cell to a fish, to an ape, to a human. That kind of extrapolation has not been verified by the fossil record. Also, what is even more fundamental is microevolution is based on variation. Adaptive variation, natural selection. Adaptive variation, natural selection. But what evolution has not shown is the creative engine, the creative mechanism that can allow a being to suddenly have wings, to suddenly have a brain. No, mutations is not a creative process. Mutation is an accident. Okay. You cannot have a bunch of accidents producing a wing. You can't have a bunch of accidents producing a brain. You can't have a bunch of accidents producing life when there's no life.
Well, what about the environmental?
Well, that's a different theory.
You have to adapt
That's
to the environment
abiogenesis
over
theory,
time.
not the theory about.
They don't have wings, but unfortunately they live in an environment where they didn't have predators, so they had no need to fly away. So therefore, they do have wings. They're just residual.
Just talk to a breeder. You can breed, fine. Well, then you know that a breeder understands the limits of the genetic pool. I don't care how many times you breed horses. You're never going to come up with a kangaroo because of the limits of the genetic pool. So that's my point that when you take microevolution and then push it to macroevolution, the mistake you're making is Where is the creative mechanism that moves a fish to having a human brain? Time. That is so weak, I would never use that. Time. Baloney. What do you mean time?
It takes millions of years because you can't.
What, you can't just say it happened because there are millions of years. That is irrational. It takes millions. What do you mean million? Why can't I play basketball like LeBron James? It's been millions of years. I mean, that is such ludicrous thinking. It is
More ludicrous than the fact that God created the earth in one day, or the universe.
The Bible never says God created the universe in a day.
Well, it's 7 days.
7 days.
It doesn't say 7 days.
Sorry,
6 days?
No.
How long did he do the rest? Like, how long?
The Bible never answers the question. The Bible never answers the question, guys. The word day.
Genesis gives a list and it says what he did on the first day, then what he did on the second day. It takes 6 days.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, then I'd encourage you to go back and take a good literature class. Because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, it says day and night. Now, how many hours would that be, about day and night? 12 hours for day, right? 12 hours for night, about. And then in Genesis chapter 1, verse 15, it says days and seasons. Well, how long would a day be there? Probably 24 hours. And then in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, when it says, when in the day that God created, how long is that? It's the entire creative process. So in light of the fact that the word, its Hebrew is yom, day, in light of the fact that it's used in Genesis 1 and 2 to refer to a 12-hour period of time, a 24-hour period of time, and then the whole creation process, don't you think it would be a little narrow-minded and bigoted to say, the Bible answers the question, how long God took to create? It doesn't, guys. It doesn't answer the question that so many Americans locked into this culture are mesmerized by, which is, how scientifically did God create? Guess what, guys? A guy writing in 1000 BC could give a rip about your science. No offense to your science majors. Moses was not concerned about how scientifically did God create the earth. So it's dishonest intellectually to go to a text where the author could give a rip about the scientific process and say, oh, this is what the text says scientifically. Guys, there's no biology, no chemistry, no physics, no geology anywhere in the Bible.
And it doesn't work.
Therefore, it's intellectually dishonest to say science contradicts the Bible. Because there's no science in the Bible to contradict.
Or any fictional book would be correct.
No, not any fictional book is correct. Holy smokes. Come on, guys. Blasto, we got to learn to think out here. I'm not saying any fictional book is correct, sir. That's rubbish. I'm saying you better learn to read by respecting literary genre. If it's a science textbook, read it as science. If it's poetry, read it as poetry. If it's historical narrative, read it as historical narrative. Because if you don't, guys, you're going to flunk out of here.
I'm passing.
If you read the writings of John Donne, Robert Blake, the same way you would a biology textbook, you will not pass the exam. You know better than that. You've got to learn to respect literary style, literary genre.
Literary fiction.
Yeah, you better respect it. If it's fiction, you better read it as fiction. That's correct. But I can promise you, Muhammad is not fiction. Muhammad is an historical person who lived, taught, fought, and died. And I can promise you, Jesus Christ is not fiction. He lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead. Because he rose from the dead, you would be very wise to take him seriously. Because guess what? If you die and rise from the dead, I will take very seriously everything you have to say. It's called evidence of reliability. You believe in Christ, not because you're gone brain dead and you blindly believe. You believe in Christ because he lived a sinless life, he taught amazing ethical teachings, he died loving and forgiving his enemies, and he rose from the dead. That's why you believe in Christ. Not because mommy and daddy taught you to, not because some preacher taught you to, or some televangelist. But because you've read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you've studied the historical evidence, and you've seen the evidence is Jesus Christ is reliable. Therefore, putting your faith in him would be a very wise decision for you guys to make.